Chinx. They took him in the street May 17th, 2015, 4 a.m., South Jamaica, Queens. A black Porsche is parked outside a McDonald's on Merrick Boulevard. Inside, Lionel Pickens, known to the world as Chinx, and his friend Breaking Bad. They had just left a party. They were supposed to go home. Instead, a dark SUV pulled up alongside them. The gunman opened fire. Chinx was hit multiple times. He was rushed to Jamaica Hospital Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. He was 31 years old. His wife was home pregnant with twins who wouldn't be born until the following month. This is the story of Chinx, Queens rapper, Coke boy, father, and the murder that changed everything. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand where Chinx came from. Lionel Pickens was born March 4th, 1983, in Far Rockaway, one of the most overlooked and underestimated corners of Queens, New York. Far Rock sits at the edge of the borough, cut off from the rest of the city by geography and economics. It was not an easy place to grow up, and Chinx didn't pretend otherwise. From a young age, music was the outlet. Chinx had a gravelly, deliberate delivery, unhurried, confident, that immediately separated him from everyone else coming out of New York at the time. He wasn't chasing trends, he was building something. His connection to French Montana would prove to be the turning point. French was already building the Coke Boys brand, a collective of hustlers turned rappers out of New York and Morocco, and when he heard Chinx, he knew. Chinx became a core member of Coke Boys, appearing on mixtapes and collaborating with French on tracks that were circulating through the city's underground. His breakout moment came with the Cocaine Riot series, 3 volumes, raw, uncut New York rap that captured the streets without ever sounding desperate. He wasn't rapping about a lifestyle he was trying to get to, he was rapping from inside it. By 2015, Chinx had signed with Def Jam through the Coke Boys imprint. He had released Dove's Cry, a melodic street record that showed another side of his artistry. He was on the verge of something real, a major album, a major push, a mainstream moment that felt inevitable. None of it would happen. The night of May 16th into the early morning of May 17th, 2015, Chinx had been out in Queens. He and a friend known as Breaking Bad had attended a party. The city was alive. There was no reason to think the night would end the way it did. At approximately 4 a.m., Chinx was sitting in his black Porsche Cayenne on Merrick Boulevard in South Jamaica, Queens, a neighborhood he knew, a place he was comfortable. A dark SUV pulled alongside the Porsche. Shots were fired from inside the vehicle, multiple rounds directly into the car. Chinx was struck multiple times. Breaking Bad was also shot and wounded. First responders rushed both men to Jamaica Hospital Medical Center. Breaking Bad survived, Chinx did not. He was pronounced dead in the early hours of May 17th. Lionel Pickens, 31 years old, one daughter named Celine, twin sons not yet born, was gone. French Montana posted on Instagram that same morning, "I lost my brother today." The Koch boys' family went silent, New York went quiet, and then the questions started. Who did this and why? The NYPD launched a murder investigation immediately. South Jamaica, Queens was a neighborhood they knew well, complex street dynamics, deep-rooted beefs, overlapping crews. This was not going to be a simple case to solve. Initially, investigators had little to go on publicly. There were witnesses. There was surveillance footage from the area around Merrick Boulevard. There were shell casings, but the streets were not talking. This is how it often goes in cases involving high-profile figures from the rap world. The culture of silence, the same one that drives so many of these cases into cold case files, made the work harder. But detectives kept digging. They tracked phone records. They reviewed surveillance footage from multiple locations. They talked to people in the community who, over time, started filling in details. What they found pointed to something specific. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery attempt. This was a targeted hit. Chinx had been followed. The SUV had not pulled up by accident. Someone knew where he was, what he was driving, and when to move. The question was, who ordered it and why? It took over a year, but in 2016, investigators made their move. Two brothers, Jamar Hill, known as Chi, and Tyshawn Hill, known as Ghost, were arrested and charged in connection with the murder of Chinx. Both were from Queens. Both had prior criminal histories, and both, according to prosecutors, had a motive that stretched back years. The alleged motive was rooted in a long standing street beef, one that connected back to the Coke Boys circle, and an incident from 2012 involving another member of the crew. The specifics of that incident were laid out in court documents, but the short version is this. The Hill brothers believed they had been wronged, and the beef had been festering for 3 years before it came to a head on Merrick Boulevard. Chinx, prosecutors argued, was targeted because of his association with that crew, not because of anything he had personally done to the Hill brothers, but because, in the logic of street conflict, he was connected to the people they blamed. He was in the wrong car with the wrong affiliation on the wrong night. The case wound through the courts for years. Jamar Chi Hill and Tyshawn Ghost Hill both faced murder charges in connection with Chinx's death. The prosecution's case rested on surveillance footage, cell phone data, and witness testimony, a familiar combination in street murder cases, and one that can be difficult to argue against when the evidence lines up. The defense challenged the identification evidence in a nighttime shooting from a moving vehicle with cameras capturing partial images. There is always room to argue about what the footage actually shows and who is in it. But the evidence, as prosecutors presented it, told a story. The SUV had been tracked, the phones had been tracked, and the timeline placed the brothers in the area at the time of the shooting. Jamar Chi Hill was convicted of murder in the second degree. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in state prison. The case against Tyshawn Ghost Hill took a different path. Legal proceedings stretched out, and the case remained in motion through various hearings and appeals. For Chinx's family, no verdict could undo what had happened, but the conviction of one of the men responsible meant that accountability, at least in part, had been reached. The most devastating detail in this entire story is the one that gets overlooked when people talk about the music and the beef and the streets. When Chinx was killed on May 17, 2015, his wife Janelle Caceres was pregnant with twins. She didn't just lose her husband that morning. She lost the father of children who hadn't been born yet. She was left to carry that pregnancy to term alone, to deliver two boys into a world where their father was already gone. Caden and Caden Pickens were born approximately 1 month after their father was murdered. Janelle has spoken publicly about what those days were like, grieving while pregnant, trying to hold herself together for Celine, their daughter, while carrying two more children who would never know their father's voice except through recordings. She has continued to keep Chinx's memory alive, speaking his name, sharing his music, raising their children with an understanding of who their father was and what he meant. In a story full of violence and street politics and courtrooms, it is this part, a woman delivering twins while mourning her husband, that puts the human cost into sharpest focus. When an artist dies young, the music takes on a different weight. Every bar becomes a document, every ad lib a piece of evidence that this person was real, was here, was building something. Chinx left behind a body of work that the Koch boys family made sure did not disappear. His debut studio album, Welcome to JFK, was released posthumously in June 2015, less than a month after he was killed. It debuted on the Billboard charts and featured collaborations with French Montana, Jadakiss, and others who had watched him build toward this moment. The album was everything it was supposed to be: raw, focused, Queens to the bone. It served as both an introduction to listeners who hadn't found him yet and a farewell to those who had been following him since the cocaine riot days. French Montana made a point of keeping Chinx's name in his music and interviews. Other Coke Boys members did the same. In a culture that can move quickly past its losses, the commitment to not letting Chinx be forgotten said something about what he meant to the people around him. His music continued to circulate on streaming platforms, finding new listeners who discovered him after his death and went back through the catalog looking for more. There's something specific about where Chinx came from that matters in how we understand his story. Far Rockaway is not a neighborhood that New York celebrates. It doesn't have the cultural mythology of Harlem or the South Bronx or Bed-Stuy. It sits at the end of the A train line, geographically separated from the rest of Queens, often left out of conversations about New York rap history, despite producing artists who have made their mark. Chinx was one of those artists. He carried Far Rock with him in his music, not as a gimmick, not as a brand, but as a lived reality that shaped every syllable he put on tape. When he died, Far Rockaway lost one of the few people who had made it out and looked back. The community felt that loss in a specific way, not just as fans, but as neighbors. Tributes went up in the neighborhood. People who had known him since childhood came together to mourn someone who had remained real to them even as his profile grew. This is part of what makes these losses so complicated. When a rapper from a neighborhood like Far Rock makes it, they carry the whole block with them in some sense. When they're taken, the block loses something that can't be replaced by the next artist who comes along. The hardest thing to reckon with in the Chinx story is the proximity to the finish line. By May 2015, Chinx had already done the hard part. He had put in years of work, he had survived the streets, he had built a real fan base, he had a major label deal, he had a completed album ready to drop, the album that would have been his proper debut, his formal introduction to the mainstream, was days away from release when he was killed. Artists work their entire careers for that moment. The years of grinding through mixtapes, the collaborations that build your name piece by piece, the late nights in the studio, all of it pointed toward what was about to happen. He never got to see it. He never got to do the interviews, the shows, the press run for the album he had made. He never got to hold his twin sons. The music exists, the legacy exists, the family he built exists. But the continued evolution of Lionel Pickens as an artist, as a father, as a man, that was taken on Merrick Boulevard at 4 a.m. by people who decided a year's old beef was worth a murder. Chinx has been gone for over a decade now. The twins he never met are growing up. Celine is growing up. Janelli has continued to keep his name alive. In the rap world, his name comes up when people talk about who New York lost too soon, in the same breath as Pop Smoke, Nipsey Hussle, and others who were building something real when they were taken. The difference with Chinx is that his story never got the full mainstream reckoning those artists received. He didn't have a chart-topping record at the time of his death. He didn't have a massive social media following. He was on the way up, not yet at the peak. That makes his legacy harder to measure, but no less real to the people who knew his music and understood what he was capable of. French Montana has never stopped saying his name. The Coke Boys have never stopped honoring him. And the catalog, the Cocaine Riot tapes, Welcome to JFK, the collaborations scattered across years of New York underground rap, remains available for anyone who wants to understand what Queens had in Lionel Pickens. He deserved more time, more albums, more mornings with his family. Instead, he got a Porsche on Merrick Boulevard, a dark SUV pulling up, and a story that ends the way too many of them do. Too young, too soon, and too much left to do. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. Who from New York rap do you think deserved more time? Who should we cover next? Subscribe to Crimetown TV. New videos every week. The stories that need to be told.